Good evening. I'm Stephanie Manning, Vice President of Consumer Products for the Portland Press Herald. Thank you for joining us tonight to hear from the experts about the upcoming school year. It's heartwarming to see so many of our subscribers come face to face with our newsroom. Your subscription makes tonight's event and our daily local journalism possible. We're grateful to our community for recognizing its value and supporting our work. Now let me introduce you to our host and panelists. Our newsroom host is Rachel Ohm. Rachel covers K-12 schools, higher education, and statewide education issues for the Press Herald. She's previously covered Franklin and Somerset counties for the Morning Sentinel in Waterville, and higher education at the Knoxville News Sentinel in, guess where, Tennessee. Prior to her arrival in Maine, Rachel spent some time in New York City and earned her master's in journalism at NYU. Joining Rachel tonight are Heather Perry, the superintendent of the Gorham Public Schools. Thanks, Heather, for jumping in tonight. Melissa-Jo Coombs, a fifth grade teacher at Skillin Elementary School in South Portland. And Rob Westerberg, the choral director at York High School. And yes, we're all dying to know how you teach people to sing over Zoom. Without further ado, please welcome them to the Zoom stage.
Hi, so thank you for the introduction, Stephanie. And thanks everyone for attending, especially Heather. I know it was hard to find someone a little last minute after the Portland School Board ran into today, so I appreciate it. And to get started, I guess I want to ask you guys to talk a little bit about what your reopening plans look like. I think there are probably questions about what the hybrid model in particular, what that schedule looks like. So maybe Heather, you can start and kind of give us a district overview, and then Rob and Melissa, you guys can jump in and talk about what your school's schedules and reopening plans will look like.
Thank you, Rachel. So in the Gorham schools, we have what we're calling our yellow plan, which is also referred to as a hybrid plan. And that's our school committee voted to open all of our schools K-12 under that plan. In the Gorham schools, our schedule basically looks like a Monday, Wednesday for group A, and a Tuesday, Thursday for group B. And then Friday is what we're calling sort of a flexible day where we have a lot of things going on Friday. So it's not like sit at home kind of stuff, but it is a very busy day, but it is a remote day. So students will be in school face-to-face 2 days per week for all across all grades, K-12. And again, our student body has been split into two groups, an A group and a B group, so that roughly 50% of our students are on site in our facilities on any of those days.
Go ahead.
Yeah, York High School, speaking from the high school perspective, it's actually very similar. We're doing half the alphabet on Monday and Tuesday for their blue and white days for their schedule, and then the other half on Thursdays and Fridays. And as you said, Heather, Wednesday, a remote day where we can touch base with individuals and, also be, dealing with what we know will be social, emotional well-being issues that we need to confront. And that Wednesday will be our opportunity to do some reaching out. But it seems to be a model that's been adopted across the state from colleagues I've talked to.
Yeah, South Portland is very similar. We're going into the hybrid model. We'll have Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, and Wednesday will be remote, where classroom teachers will get to, at least at the elementary level, will get to meet with their whole class online in the morning, and then they'll have their specials and so forth from there on, while we do some, planning and preparing for the rest of the days.
So one thing I want to ask about is on the off days or the learn at home days. I guess they're not off days, but on those remote learning days, or even for students who, I know a lot of districts are choosing to give students a remote only option. I'm curious what the remote offerings will look like. Like I know there was wide consensus, it seems like last spring, about remote learning not being that great. So I'm wondering what changes you guys might make in your classrooms for students who are going to be remote.
So
yeah, go ahead and start.
Would you mind? Okay. So those are basically two different questions, actually. So just so folks are clear, The remote option, at least in Gorham, if a family selects a remote option, it is entirely remote. There is no sort of back and forth. We will be having staff members assigned to operate those remote programs, but basically those remote programs form a cohort almost of their own, and in a community, an online community almost of their own as well. So there will be some interactions with students within the regular setting or the classroom assigned settings, but mostly they will be remote, and it will be an entirely remote learning experience. For the students that are in the classroom, basically come into school 2 days per week and then learning via distance on the other 3 days, we've developed quite a very strong program for those students. And we've differentiated it a little bit between K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. Whereas as you go up through the grades, we're increasing the synchronicity to the programming. So as you get, for example, as you get in through the high school grades, students that attend period 1 and face-to-face on a Monday, they're expected to be participating in that same class on Tuesday. Now, it may not be that they're zooming into the class. It may be that they're working with a group on a project or something else, but they are expected to be working during those same times on those off days. Unlike at the kindergarten or first grade level or at those lower grades, there's not as much synchronicity there because it's just not, it's not cognitively something that is appropriate for that age level. So we're looking more at maximizing the instruction that's taking place during the face-to-face time, ensuring that the time on the off days is spent practicing the skills and digging deeper into those skills on the off days with particular activities, but it's not as synchronous a schedule as you would have at the older level. So that's sort of how we're dealing with that, and that is very different from what we experienced in the spring. The spring was very much an emergency sort of crisis situation, and we were really scrambling and doing the best that we could. Now we have some really thoughtful approaches and instructional approaches that are very much geared towards this sort of a rhythm that we're going to create in that schedule that we just described.
Yeah, the analogy I've been using is that I feel like in March when we went remote, I feel like we were in this proverbial, we were flying this plane and the engines went out, and we had 3 months to basically land the thing. And as the commissioner said, do no harm, you know. And in our scenario, our situation right now is radically different, where we've had time to plan and prepare and think through scenarios. The learning that'll take place for the first half of the alphabet who is in school on Monday and Tuesday, for Thursday and Friday, that could actually look different by class, but it's going to be very transparent what the expectations are. Our platform is Google Classroom, and I know it's widely used, not exclusively, but it's a very popular platform. And we have 6 days of professional development before the students show up. And a significant amount of that will be making sure that it's a very rigorous and yet manageable and approachable setup that we have for those students, either fully remote or, as you said, on the days where they're learning from home. We just need to make sure we're taking care of those students as well and giving them equal opportunities.
Yeah, I think the one difference, especially in the fall, is that we will have some contact with the students in the classroom, and we can explicitly teach the expectations for remote days. So even K to 5, you know, they will learn what the expectations are and also learn how to use the tools in a better way. I think when, or at least I know when I started, I thought 5th graders, they use technology all the time. And they do, but they don't use it in an academic way all the time. So at least with this hybrid model, we'll be able to teach them how to use the tools at home. And we have a better understanding of how to use the tools. I know South Portland did a lot of work. We have a great informational tech team, and they built curriculum for us to really learn how to use technology in a rigorous way to teach our students. And we've all been working all summer, you know, creating plans to hopefully, you know, reach those targets in a way that's meaningful for K to 5 or K to 12.
Melissa, you said something that's also really important, and it's exactly opposite. The one thing we had in our favor last spring was we had already established those relationships with our students, right? We have students walking into brand new schools from junior high, middle school to high school, they're starting the 9th grade year. Those connections have not been established, changing, 4th grade teacher to a 5th grade teacher. The benefit we have with, to the degree we can, make this work with these models, is that we're making those connections with those kids. So even if we do have to go fully remote, we've got that foundation in place. And that might be the most important thing we do this entire September.
Yeah, relationships. This first 6 weeks of school is all about building community and relationships. And I think that from our first 6 weeks hybrid, that's going to be extremely important. And I think as teachers, we get really focused on, we got to start teaching the content and the academics. And it's kind of freeing to be able to step back and be like, okay, I need to know these kids and understand these kids, and they need to know me and understand me as well. It's a mutual community building time.
We've talked at length about that in Gorham, and the fact that first period of time is absolutely focused on the relationships. These students and these teachers have gone through a very traumatic experience in the spring. I wouldn't say a lot got better over the summer. And so really focusing on those relationships is going to be key. And also focusing on how to use the tools, as you described, Melissa, if we do have to go remote, that we have those things in place so that it's a much more successful experience as well.
So I do want to transition and talk a little bit about a different part of the preparations that you guys are undertaking, which is, getting ready to implement the physical distancing requirements and the requirements that the state has to reopen. I guess, Melissa, I'll pick on you to go first, because I know we were chatting about this beforehand, and I think it's on everyone's mind, like with elementary kids, how are we going to enforce mask wearing? Like, what will that look like? So I'm wondering how you've thought about how you're going to address it in your classroom. So maybe you can start off, and then the other two can jump in and say, what kind of preparations they're doing for physical distancing and enforcing things like mask wearing.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of us have lost sleep at night thinking about all of this. I was in my classroom today, and our maintenance staff has already set up our desks. I actually have a really nice sized classroom, and there were 10 desks set up, and they were spaced out, and my desk was spaced out from everybody else. So the physical distance part, I'm not as concerned about, because they'll sit at their desks. I mean, it's a bummer that we can't sit on our carpets and stuff like that, but kids are resilient. They'll be fine. And the mask part is definitely, the one that I worry about the most. And I think it goes back to those first 6 weeks. We have to explicitly teach them how to wear it, why we're wearing it. We will have mask breaks. I know that we're getting tents so that we can be outside. But really, it just comes down to educating families, educating students on why we're doing this. And I always try to be transparent with my students. So and they're 5th graders. When I taught 2nd grade, I don't know if I would have said this, but it is hard. It's not easy, but this is why we're doing it. And I think kids will respond hopefully positively to, the honesty of the teachers, and to just know you're doing it for other people, not just yourself. And there are going to be those kids that need a break from taking their masks off. And I think, those first 6 days that we're in professional development, we're going to learn how to handle those situations. And there will be those kids who purposefully take it off. And I think as a staff, we will work on problem solving how to handle that. I don't have those answers now, because it's something we've never done before. I just know that, we set up norms with our students, and so we're going to have to set up norms where it includes the masks and how you wear them. And I know we have the 3 W's: wear your mask, wash your hands, and watch where you're standing. So it'll just be part of teaching our routine and procedures, I think. So.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. That's the approach we need to take. And if we have people who are challenging that, the messaging is just very simple. It's outside of our control. It's not our choice. It has to be done this way. I was mentioning earlier, two options are to wear a mask in school or not to be in school. And we just need to make sure that's very clearly spelled out both to students and to their families so they understand, as you said, why we're doing it.
Yeah, and we're trying to connect it to already existing things that kids are very familiar with. For example, the dress code. Our students are very familiar with the dress code. They understand the dress code. Trying to connect that and the public safety message of why these things are so important, that there are circumstances that you have to follow different rules in a school setting because of the fact that we're in a school setting, and public safety and the safety of our staff and the safety of our students is primary of concern. So being open, being clear in the messaging, being patient, being kind, but being firm, and connecting it to things that they already know exist, like a dress code, or like in Gorham, we have a very strong code of conduct that we utilize, that we're going to be connecting those things to. And so I think it's just a conversation. It's just another conversation with students, an opportunity to learn.
Yeah, I guess just to follow up, I mean, Heather and Rob, do you expect much pushback, like especially from high school students who may be a little more independent?
I mean, yeah, go ahead. You're the high school teacher. You go ahead.
Well,
and do that one.
I suspect our answers may be very similar. I think we're going to have the nature of any wonderful teenager is to push back, and that's a healthy thing, and that's a good thing. Should that happen, they need to understand that, in this scenario, this is very different than even something like, a school dress code, which might change or shift from school to school, district to district. This is where we're at, as a society, and in the state of Maine, it's mandated. You have to. And so there may be some pushback, but as you said, Heather, just be compassionate but firm, and this is how it has to be.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for our high school at Gorham High School. And I think also a message for students is another public safety message, where whenever you're dealing with issues of public safety, what you have to do is educate people to the understanding that they own a piece of this, and the success of whether or not we remain in school is partially, it's a piece that each of us owns, to take responsibility for our actions and what we do. So if our students, which I know for a fact, our high school students want to be with each other, I know that, right? So if we can be clear with them that part of the responsibility that they own as high school students to be able to be with each other on a day in and day out basis is to perform these sort of tasks and comply with these sort of safety protocols, then I think that helps spread the message as well.
So something I think a lot of people are curious about is how some of the activities, extracurricular activities, sports, music, things like that are gonna work in schools. So Rob, being a music teacher, I'm really curious how things are gonna look for you. Will students be able to sing? Will they be able to do these kinds of things? So maybe you can start talking about what kind of protocols or just how you might approach singing and participating in music. And then maybe Heather and Melissa can also jump in and talk about how your schools are going to address extracurriculars and other activities.
Well, the two sides of the same coin are extracurricular, co-curricular activities and athletics, and the academic subjects, which involve group activities. And I had a wonderful conversation with our assistant to our athletic director earlier this week, and they're that's all over the place, and that webinar that's going to happen in 2 weeks is going to be very well attended, and should be a great opportunity to hear from athletics. But what they're dealing with is, you remove the group activities, and you've really removed the sport. What I think we're driven towards, both for the performing arts and probably for physical education classes, is that the optics is that it appears to be all about the large group, and indeed that's a very significant component of what we do. The emotionality is all tied into that for sure, and a lot of our product is tied into what we do as an ensemble. But for both bands and choruses, we also know that we assess individual students. And I've been telling my friends, our superpower is that you can take the delivery method away from us, and we're still going to be able to bring home some serious content. We know that if you can't sing all together, we can still set up protocols for singing and assessments that involve recording from home. We know that it opens up tremendous possibilities for composing. There's some wonderful online programs. York High School has agreed to purchase an opportunity for all my students to use one particular program called Flat, where my students in choir will be able to compose. And we're going to be able to get after some wonderful musical elements, go after music theory and all that. And I know the same is true for the band. So there's an emotional loss for us in the performing arts, for sure. I think we're coming to terms with that as best we can. More importantly, our students are trying to come to terms with that. But from an academic standpoint, it's still game on, you know, and it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for us to go about it in some unique and different ways until we can be back together again.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second before you go, Heather. So, I mean, last spring, like, were you trying to teach students over Zoom, or like how did that work for you? And
Sure.
Are you changing it this fall?
So what I was able to do with my classes, we at York High School in the choral program, we're always individually assessing students through videos, even when we're together. So we'll do our practicing all together. We'll practice our sight reading, and I know my colleagues around the state are very similar models. But our assessment of student growth has always been done through videos, at least the last 5-6 years. And so the assessment tool actually did not change. What I couldn't do was provide the same level of support remotely. And I think that is where we're going to continue to struggle, but we know we can make it work. There's one class that I have, it's a vocal workshop class where the student was working on a assigned piece of music, and they would record it on their own at home and then submit the video. Well, then they and I would Zoom together and watch their video together and actually dissect it and pick it apart and work on their technique. And at the end of the year, we actually had a Zoom recital for the students that participated in that. That doesn't necessarily work for every class, but it's an example where we take the pieces from when we're all together that we know we can transfer. We do that. We try to pick up the rest and substitute it out, swap it out for different approaches that we think can work. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could just add, I marvel, it does. I marvel at the creativity of our creative arts folks, and it's just incredible to see what people were able to do in the spring and what I know they have planned for the fall in these areas, even with the sort of the restrictions and the rules and the safety accommodations that have to be in place. I know, for example, I was just reading an email and having a conversation with our the production. We usually do a school musical each fall, and the person that does that has already found a play that can be done in any setting, whether it is whether it's a traditional performance with an audience live, or whether it can be done entirely online with a streaming audience. So it's just incredible to see the creativity that exists out there amongst our professionals in these areas. I marvel at it all the time, and I have no doubt that we'll be able to do equal, if not even sometimes more creative and even better programming via distance in some of these areas. So I'm optimistic, to be honest.
I know I call them specialists. The music, art, and phys ed have been working really hard at, you know, creating more engaging lessons where they're actually going to be synchronous. In the spring, they weren't synchronous. It was more asynchronous. And for the amount of kids that they work with, and at least at K-5, I mean, they work with K-5, and the lessons that they can come up with and the creativity that they have, I sometimes sit back and I'm just like in awe of what they can do. I don't really know all of the details yet, but I know that they're all working really hard to make sure the kids get their art, gym, and phys ed, which is always the favorite of school. So.
Well, the other neat thing that we've watched happen since last spring is the collaborative relationships that we've had, and certainly for the visual performing arts teachers across Maine, has just been through the roof. And I feel like that has been strong. The Maine Music Educators Association has been strong all along for helping us to connect and collaborate. Jason Anderson is our content specialist at the Department of Education, and he hosted a series of Zoom meetings, both for the elementary level teachers as well as middle school and secondary. And, you know, we had Zoom meetings where there were attendees from 6 different states, including Texas. You know, we're really trying to collaborate and come up with some best practices and some best approaches that, again, if our delivery has to change, our content can remain intact and we can still do really, really wonderful things for our kids.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the point about, you know, music as a academic subject, but then also separately as an extracurricular activity, and like how you're adapting differently for those 2 different things.
I'm not involved in the theater program, but for instance, what you said, Heather, I think, you know, for clubs and activities, certainly for sports, it's going to be a challenge, but hopefully, you know, we can see some successful opportunities for our kids in those areas as well.
And we won't get into sports. We have a separate webinar on that coming, and I feel like it would just be a whole nother can of worms. So I'll ask you guys about something else. So I think people are also curious about, at least I know I'm curious about what happens if there is a case in a school. I know we've already seen that happening in other places around the country. So I'm curious, how will your schools respond? Like, how do you think they should respond? You know, what happens if a student or a teacher gets the virus?
Yeah, so this is something I've had to talk about a lot in public forums. It's probably the first question that comes up amongst parents quite often in the public forums that we have in Gorham. And what I describe is basically the process. And I'm upfront with folks, if they're looking for like a hard and fast number, you know, if you have this many cases, you'll make this decision. That's not going to exist. Instead, what we have is a series of data points that we'll be looking at and helping to inform our decisions, and a series of levels at which we can make those decisions. So first, I explained the levels. The way that we've structured our schools across K through 12, we're able to make decisions about moving from a yellow model to a red, for example, at not just the district level, which is what we were stuck with last spring, but also at the school level and the classroom level. So we're able to actually get it down to that finer detail that if there were, for example, you know, an outbreak that occurred, in most of our situations, we would likely be able to contain that with a classroom level and simply ask a classroom to basically go red for a period of 14 days and then come back. There may be situations though, especially in a place like a high school where you can't cohort quite as well as you do in the elementary school, where if you have an outbreak, you might have to ask the school to go from a yellow to a red. But I think it would be more of a community spread issue before we would get into the district-wide decision around, you know, moving from yellow to red. And the data points that we are going to utilize on that range basically with each level. So, for example, if I'm looking at a district-wide level decision, I'm looking at the CDC guidance, which is right now is all the counties levels at green, but I'm also looking at the community spread and what's going on in the community of Gorham. If I'm looking at that school level, what I'm looking at is my school level data. And I don't know about other systems, but in Gorham, what we've done is we're hiring basically what we're calling clinic assistants to work with our nurses, but their main job is going to be contact tracing. And so at the school level, we will have that sort of data readily available for us to make decisions, you know, to help with that classroom versus school level, moving from yellow to red. And so that's the type of data that we'll utilize in those areas. And so I feel confident that we have, you know, the structures in place and that we have the ability to move. As a superintendent of schools, I say this, you know, jokingly, but actually very seriously as well, that I'm going to wish for the days of snow calls again. That's going to be, I'm thinking that's going to be easy. I'd love to have snow calls again. This is going to be a little harder and harder to explain and communicate, but it's something that we're going to have to treat in that way, that it's going to be an ongoing sort of daily check-in and discussion around, you know, how that's working.
What would the communication look like? Like, how would families get notified if there's a case, and how would a student, like if a student would the student just be like left on their own to go get a test, or like would a school nurse, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the first thing is in our messaging is we're being very clear with parents that they need to communicate with us. So if there's a symptom, for example, that occurs in the morning when they're doing their symptoms check, so that's happening across all of, I know everybody's doing that, that's part of the requirements. So if a symptom pops up in the morning and they hold their child back, we're asking them to communicate to us, whether it's through the app that they have to do, or if they just give us a phone call and let us know that something's going on. That contact tracing position would be aware, even at the symptoms level, even if there's not a positive test yet, they're aware that there may be an issue. They work with the nurses. The nurses would help to advise the parents. We're staying strongly, if there's a symptom, you need to look to your PCP and reach out and schedule an appointment and at least talk with your doctor. It may not result in a test, but at least you need to reach out to your PCP. And then we would follow up from that point forward, and we would be in continual communication as a school with that family, just checking in, how things going, did you get a test, have you heard a result, those kinds of things, and have that constant communication. If a decision is made to make an adjustment, for example, if we find out that there has been a positive case, our contact tracers would directly contact the parents of those that may have been exposed and or the staff members that would have been exposed, and they would do that immediately. And then we would make decisions about, what level we might have to work with, whether it's a classroom has to go to red, whether it's a school or higher up based on the exposure of that. So that would be that sort of nebulous part where we'd have to play it by ear. But we work closely with our nurses, with our contact tracers, and with the CDC in those decisions.
Do either of you, Melissa or Rob, have any insight into how your districts are going to be handling possible cases, or, how as a teacher you might respond if one of your students gets a case?
Yeah, I think, as a whole district, it probably sounds a lot like Gorham's. I know that we will have a school nurse in every building. A lot of buildings share school nurses, so South Portland has hired one for every building. And there's going to be, we've been given protocols and slideshows of information of things to do, the self-screening and so forth. I know there'll be a quarantine area if there is a case or a suspected case. And, I think all the districts are kind of working together on the same kind of plan. I know that teachers are sometimes some of the first people to notice. It's that whole building relationships. Like I can sometimes tell when a kid is not feeling well just by how they walk into the building that day. I think I heard our principal say that, our school nurse will be kind of hanging out in the hallways as kids enter the building, just taking peeks at them. And because a lot changes in an hour from when they do the screening maybe to when they get to school. So as for how I would handle it, if it I don't know. That's the, if it happens in my class, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just wait and I'll follow. I am very, I feel very confident in my administration and know that they will work with me, and it's kind of like a wait and see.
You bring up a point that I just have, I've been thinking a lot, how are things going to be different? We know it'll be different, but you said something unrelated to this question, but I want to get back to it. So much of what we do as teachers is read our kids, and you're mentioning the nurse being out there, and we've never had to read our kids with their faces covered.
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to that. I think that's going to be, the bolt aside the head when we get all together. As wonderful as it will be to see my students, it will be unnerving to see them all there wearing masks. And that's going to take some serious getting used to, both for them, but also for us as teachers. How much of what we do is based on reacting to what we are seeing literally in their faces. So that's going to be its own transition. At York, with regard to if there's a case of the coronavirus, we know it's not going to be a binary situation with what we're doing. It's not going to be if or. It's going to be all these different, parts on the spectrum, including students who might be with us and then removing, or vice versa. But I've been really pleased. I think for any community members watching this right now, it seems to me more than anything, whether they agree or disagree with what their schools or districts are doing, just be transparent, you know. And I feel like in the York School District, they've done a great job of being transparent. We already have a very detailed draft in place for if they turn the switch and said, yep, we're going red, we're going fully remote. We actually already have a draft of what that schedule is going to look like. And I'm sure we're not alone in that. But, you know, to answer the question, whatever scenario is going to hit us, we're really trying to be proactive in you know, if this happens, what's our reaction going to be, and what does that look like academically for our kids? I feel like that's another area we've had enough time to actually address that, and I'm optimistic that we can move forward no matter what the circumstances.
I feel like something that keeps coming up is like how much work there's going to be to adjust like in the first 6 weeks and teach kids these new routines. So I'm wondering, you know, what you all think about how is that going to impact kids? And I know you mentioned briefly like the social emotional impact. I'm just, you know, I'm wondering like, what is the impact going to be on kids of learning these new routines? Like, how is it going to affect their learning? How will it affect their social and emotional well-being? I'm sure you guys have thought about that. So I don't know who wants to go first, but maybe one of you can jump in and answer that.
I'd love to hear your concerns for the elementary level, Melissa, because I think that's going to be pretty radical.
I think, you know, the best approach we're going to have to do is go slow to go fast, or and just do it being mindful of what this is all new for all of us, and we've all experienced some sort of trauma. And I know everybody's talking like our kids are going to be behind, they're going to be behind, but behind what? It's like this arbitrary line. And I think teachers are really good at reading students of where they are. And yes, we are definitely going to fit the academics in, but they're not behind. They're where they need to be, or they're, I'm not making sense. There's no real line, you know, they're going to learn their math facts. They're going to learn how to read. It may not be as fast as, you know, my 10-year-old learned a lot faster than my 7-year-old, but it's a different world than when my 10-year-old learned to read. And I think we're also really good at incorporating those academics into the social emotional piece of things too. So the workload for students, you know, it always starts off a little bit slower, and, you know, we watch their stamina as they go along, and we modify and differentiate for students. And, you know, if you can tell when they're tired, you can tell when they're energetic, and it's just gonna be watching their eyes and seeing how they're feeling. I don't know if that answers your question. I think, you know, we just have to be patient with ourselves. We have to be patient with our students. And I think we have to be positive, and they're gonna learn what they need to know. And it just might not be as fast as you may expect it to be.
Yeah, was there anyone who taught the same way on May 25th as they were attempting to on March 25th? You know, and we've learned so much, and I love how you put that. We really have to understand that it's about growth, not matching a certain endpoint. And whatever that growth is, whatever we can facilitate, and their emotional needs well in place, while also moving the needle academically as best we can, whatever that looks like by school and grade level, that will be the balance and the trick, but we can do it. We just need to know that we're simultaneously needing to do both.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I mean, to me, it just goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, you have to meet those things first. So social, emotional, you have to address the trauma, you have to address the emotional needs of students and staff, not just, I mean, I keep bringing that up. Our staff has gone through a lot too, and we need to pay attention to that, and we need to support folks first. And if you do that well, and you create that solid foundation, and you take the time to do it right, and you can build a very solid structure on top of that. But if you try to shortcut that, it will be crumbling. It's just like building a house, right? You've got to have a solid foundation, and that foundation is all around social emotional needs and making sure that those are well met for students and staff before we try to jump into anything else.
And I think I like how you brought up staff. Sorry, I jumped in. You know, teachers, staff have been working so hard. And I think teaching remotely was the hardest teaching I've ever done. I mean, I was working long, and I've been teaching for 12 years. Like, I know what I'm doing, and I was still working long hours. And so, you know, we've been preparing and we've been getting ready, and we're going to need to be able to take a breath and kind of go a little bit slow. And, you know, we've learned so much. And I think one thing I have to remember is I've learned so much that I can't just jump into September and do it all, you know? So if I'm reminding my students that, or, you know, my students need to go slow to go fast, I have to slow down too to go fast. So
we have to model what we want for our students as well. Yep.
So, I mean, be honest, how stressed out are you guys right now?
I have never seen, and I'm going to speak broadly from my perspective. I just have to say, I've never seen anything like this. And I've been in education 23 years. This is my 15th year as a superintendent of schools in the state of Maine. I've never seen a workload like this. I've never seen stress, anxiety, and when I say trauma, it's trauma. And it's for the children and families, and it's for the adults in the schools. I've never seen anything like it. And you know, you get a little downtime in the summer. I know teachers have not had any downtime. They've had sleepless nights instead. And so just thinking about what it is that they're going to be doing in the classroom setting with students to try to support students. Our people care so tremendously. Education is not, it's not a vocation. It is a part of who we are as individuals and humans. And, you know, most people say, you know, don't be your job, you know, but in education, we are our job. And I think that we need to be paying attention to that, because people are really, I think, what you described, Melissa, I think that's something we have to be cognizant of, that, you know, people are so ready. They've thought about all this, and we have to pace ourselves and make sure we're paying attention to the things we need to pay attention to, social emotional needs, to make this successful. But it has been the most, you can't even describe it. There's no comparison to what's been happening the past 5-6 months in education. And I see that across the board in any part of education: teachers, support staff, custodial, maintenance. Everybody is in that same boat. And families and parents and families, and the angst and the anxiety that's out there around that. So it's just, I think part of our role as educators is to get the kids into school, even on a part-time, you know, hybrid basis, and really just kind of create that structure and that calming for the community, to understand that there is something they can depend on, that we can do this, and just kind of build that strength and that foundation. But it has been something else, something I hope lots of books have written about, because it is unique.
I have to say that, and I won't disagree with a syllable of everything you just said, because it's true. And especially, you know, when you talk about the family front, I have to tell you, I am crazy excited to get back, because it's finally our opportunity to be the role models for our students, to engage our students again, and to try to bring some semblance of normalcy, knowing it's not going to be normal, but trying to be there for our kids. And that's why we all went into this to begin with. So I'm actually so stoked to finally get back with the kids. And even if it doesn't last more than a couple of weeks, at least we can touch base with them and have that connection. And I think I'm feeling this way, particularly since we lost so much of last spring, you know?
Yeah, I know. I feel overwhelmed, because I have to make the choices for my own kids, and I can see it from all sides. So I feel like I lose a lot of sleep, as many educators are doing. But I'm also excited. I miss my kids. I miss my students. I never would have imagined ending a school year like I did last year. I think the hardest part is going to be not hugging my students. And I'm excited because I've learned a lot too. And I feel like it's pushed me to be better. And it's So, lots of emotions. It depends on the minute of the day, but I think excited, I think nervous and overwhelmed kind of cover it.
Well, I want to jump to audience questions because we only have like 15 minutes left and there are a couple that are popping up. So I'm just going to go with the one over here that's in the chat. It's from John West, and he's asking for all panelists, what are your plans for working with special needs students?
Yes, so I'll jump in for what our plans are at this point in time. So our special needs students will be, they were divided into the A and B groups as every other student was. They'll be receiving their regular instruction on the days that they're in school face-to-face. Many of our students will be able to still access their IEP needs via distance on the days that they're not in school. But there are going to be some students that are going to need to be in school physically on those off days, and we're making those plans as well. So there are students, depending on what their IEP goals are and what their needs are, that we will have in school for more days than a regular education student per se, because we are responsible to deliver and meet the IEP goals for our special needs students.
That's one of the things I like about the hybrid schedule that we're sharing, and so many other schools are, that Wednesday for us is going to be so critical for making sure it gives us a chance to reflect on just the prior week. Where are they? What are we in fact meeting the needs of their IEP? And where we might be floundering or missing a component, that's our opportunity to say, okay, we need to readjust and we need to meet those needs as well. So bringing them on in with their peers on those days that they're in school, but that Wednesday I think is going to be particularly critical for those students under an IEP. So we're constantly managing and monitoring their progress, and that we're doing right by them.
Yeah, and I think at the elementary level, I know we'll have our special ed teachers involved, but we're also learning how to have a virtual classroom, like where we collaborate like we do in a in-person classroom, and differentiating, and there's tools and tricks to the trade that we're all learning, so that hopefully we can meet all those IEP needs a lot better than we did in the spring. And I think we'll be able to do it.
So someone else is asking, for those of you representing high schools, please comment on SAT testing opportunities you'll be offering for juniors and seniors.
I will say that we're going to be offering something, but I don't know what it is yet. I mean, that's not something that we've spent a lot of time talking about yet. It is something that is on the radar to discuss, but right now our focus has been pretty much entirely on just getting the school year up and operational for our students, and then going from there. So I can't say that we have any solid plans in that area. I am aware that I still continue to hear that there are many colleges that are not going to be looking at SATs again this coming year. Now, that's not saying that we're not going to do SATs and that sort of thing. I'm just saying that that's something that is still amongst the discussion at the college level as to how that's going to be utilized. So I would say that, that's something that's on the radar, and it's not something that we have detailed plans about at this point in time.
Yeah, same in York. Again, that transparency. It's not that it's not on the radar. It's just that our hands are more than full just trying to launch the plane. And as we start to move through the fall, we'll then be in a position to look at what that might look like for the kids.
What are mask breaks going to look like after mid-October through early April, when weather conditions will make this all look a whole lot differently?
That's a great question. I think we're all we're going to have to figure it out as we go a little bit. Hopefully, the weather cooperates a little bit, and I honestly, I don't know, maybe Heather has more of an idea of it than I do, but I think it's, we're kind of learning as we go. We know more than we did in the spring.
Yeah. I would say that, at this point in time, the first thing to understand is that, because we're entering into fall and the weather is so gorgeous in Maine this time of year, we're really not too concerned about the early part of the school year. But as things get cooler, we do know that that's going to become a more and more of an issue as we move forward. That's why I think you'll find that when the Department of Education puts its guidelines out around face masks and the need to take, breaks or the ability to take breaks, that they've been very clear that it still is allowed to occur indoors under very strict conditions. And so we would just need to be creative in ensuring that we're creating those conditions within the school building in an indoor setting to allow that to take place safely. So it is able to happen. I mean, we've got large spaces in all of our schools, gymnasiums, cafeterias, hallways, whereas we can manage to figure that out. We're just going to have to be creative about that. The beauty of it is that in Maine in the fall, we don't have to think about that immediately, but that's something that we will have to put more detailed plans in place for.
I think some of that answer might be tied into what schools are planning to do just for the lunches, because we know that that's a built-in break that every student's going to get every single day. So whatever that model looks like for their meals, I could see in a situation at York High School, not assuming it's going to happen, but there might be a class that goes into a 750 seat auditorium for 10 minutes and they're in different corners and just, I think schools can get creative, but we know that students are going to have their masks off when they eat. So they're already coming up with plans for how they can make that occur safely, and maybe just a variation of that throughout the day for various classes and various students.
We only have one other audience question waiting right now, so I have one related to that. What are you guys doing at your schools for using outdoor classroom space? Is that something that you guys are going to be using? And if you are, related to this last question, like how are you going to adapt when it does get cold?
I know that in South Portland we will utilize as much as the outdoor as we can, and we're going to have, at least at my school, we'll have schedules where we can rotate going outside. As for when it gets colder, I'm not quite sure how we will do that, but I know that we have enough spots throughout our facilities that we can rotate through, like the play set, the kickball field, different things. And we're actually going to share it with the middle school too, so that those kids can get outside as well. So
we, and going back to the performing arts, we know that there's may not happen to the same degree for choirs because of the inability for the voice to carry over a long distance. But certainly I know a lot of my colleagues in bands are going to be going outside and loving the opportunity, because there are distances that they're allowed to play their instruments outside. And I think the current distance is 13 feet, but there will be opportunities, if not entire ensembles, certainly small groups. And then when it gets cold, it might depend on how hardy the students are. They may be the ones pushing, oh, we could play in the snow, but we'll keep them safe and do due diligence in doing what's best for them.
Yeah, I just keep hearing my grandmother. I'm from the Machias area of Maine. I keep hearing my grandmother talking, we're tough Mainers. We're used to these harsh winters. Let's get them outside. These kids need to be outside more. And so I'm just thinking, we are from Maine. We do have outdoor recess, even in the wintertime. In the real cold part of wintertime, we have outdoor recess. And so there are opportunities for us to get our kids outside, even in the cold weather. We just need to plan for it, and structure it appropriately so that, kids are warm and that they have the materials to stay warm that they need in order to do that. But I will say that we're definitely looking at outdoor classroom spaces in Gorham. We have tents. I think Melissa mentioned that for South Portland. We're also doing tents. We also have had some wonderful parent volunteers to create outdoor benches for outdoor classrooms that we're going to set up in each of our schools. So we'll have about 20 to 30 benches that are going to be spread out across different areas in our schools that can be used for an outdoor classroom space. We also have the beauty in Gorham. We've got some great nature trails that are out behind many of our schools that will be used for outdoor educational purposes. So we're definitely going to be encouraging people to get outside whenever possible. If there's weather related, issues with the cold, then, bundle up and let's go. So.
Okay, here's another audience question. What are some suggestions you have for teaching live online when students don't have to show their faces, especially when teaching another language?
First of all, hi, Emery, a great colleague. I think just knowing, it goes, for me, it just goes back to, here's a list of things we know we can do, here's the list of things we know we cannot do, and how can we bring these pieces into a brand new reality. And for me, I think the student video submissions has been huge, where they cannot necessarily sing live where they are, but they, on their own time, can find a place to sing. And I would think certainly in world languages, that's an opportunity where students can be provided opportunities to record themselves and then assessed on what's going on with their face.
Either of you add anything else?
Well, just that there's some really great programs out there to support that type of work. I mean, I'm just thinking of Flipgrid, for example. That's the first one that pops to mind as a great program, and Soundtrap is another one for music, that are just great opportunities for recording for students that can be done, and then you can do all kinds of things with those to put it together. So I think the opportunities are there. I think it's just a question of thinking creatively about, making sure that you're not putting students in a position where they are uncomfortable. And where there might be, confidential stuff going on behind the scenes that you really don't want to put them in that place. Because remember, Maslow's needs come first. So they've got to be comfortable, they got to feel safe. And then once you can create those circumstances, then you can build off of that. So.
Yeah, and it's, teaching them from the get-go how to use the tools and how to be successful in doing so.
Okay, here's another one. I think this is an important one, and it goes back to what we were talking about before. What kind of supports are you all thinking of to help teachers and others who are finding themselves very stressed right now?
I'm going to jump right in and just, because I also know we're running low on time. We have at the Department of Education a specialist who is there for us to meet our own emotional needs as teachers. And I would encourage anyone viewing this to reach out to the department directly to access folks there who we can actually work with and talk things through. And they are there for our support.
And I would say that many schools also have, staff health teams or wellness teams that I know, at least in Gorham, are very actively engaged right now and trying to be creative about how do we create the conditions within which we can support our staff in a multitude of ways, whether that be yoga online or a book club that they're going to do together or whatever that is. They're very creative in that way. And I'd say, just whatever I can do to encourage that is what I'll do, to support that kind of work.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of us, part of it is just seeing our people again. I work at a school where we're a family, and it's just been so hard to not see my family every day. And so I think, just seeing them is going to be a huge, help to my psyche and my anxiety. I mean, they can look at me and be like, oh, MJ's having trouble today, but then they know how to ask questions. So I think just having our people back is going to be huge, along with maybe some peanut butter M&Ms and, things like that. So.
We are running short on time, but there is one more question from the audience. Do you believe parents will be able to meet their child's teacher face-to-face this year, or only over the internet?
Yeah, it depends on the circumstances. I mean, I know that in my school system, for example, in Gorham, under the yellow opening that we have right now, we are limiting access of parents and volunteers to the school just to try to keep us open. We really want to limit the possibility of exposure. Instead of allowing, the typical open house, though, we're doing videos for parents. We're having online social hours. We're creating Facebook pages and volunteers. We have community support coordinators that are working in neighborhoods in Gorham to support one another, and we're really trying to connect in a lot of different ways. But it may not be your traditional, open house or parent-teacher conference. That may not exist, at least in the early part of the year.
Do either of you think you'll be meeting with parents this year, or is it too soon to say?
I think it's too soon to say.
Yeah, yeah, we'll go with the flow. We'd love to, but like everything else with restrictions in place, we simply may not be able to, and we'll just know as time moves on.
Okay, well, I guess on that note, I guess that's it. And thank you all so much for participating. This was great, and you were all great about answering questions. So anything else you want to say? Otherwise, I guess we can wrap it up.
This was fun. It was great to hear from all of you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And good luck this year. Have a great year.
And thank you. That was very painless. And Javier now owes me, I believe. So we're all good.
Okay, thank you guys. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.